Hi, Keith here from Academy of Bass. Today I'm going to look at playing in different areas of the neck and the huge impact it can have on your bass lines. Hi. Given the way that we all learn how to play the bass is so heavily steeped in patterns and shapes that we play repeatedly, it's no surprise that when it comes to playing bass lines, so many of us find ourselves restricted to playing in one or two fixed positions. So the whole point of this lesson is to show you a really easy way of how to take a bass line and play parts of it in different areas and registers across the entire instrument. And what that's going to do is put your hands in different positions, which is going to lead you into playing new and different lines. And that's going to give you so many more options to help you play interesting bass lines. But more than that, it's going to do wonders for helping develop your understanding of the instrument. I'm going to play a bass line over a 2-chord progression, and the chords are G minor 7 and C7. We're in the key of F major, and G minor 7 is the chord built on the 2nd degree of the scale, so it's the 2 chord. C7 is built on the 5th degree of the scale, so it's the 5 chord. So we've got a 2-5 chord progression. If you haven't heard of that already, it's a really common chord progression and it's used everywhere and in pretty much every style of music. Now the bass line I'm going to play is this. So you can hear it's really easy, but that's going to help us keep track of it when we move it around the neck, and also it's going to make it much easier for us to follow the lines that I play. So let's learn the line. We've got G, the root note of G minor 7, then I jump to octave G, and then I'm down to B flat, which is the flattened 3rd, and I'm at the 6th fret of the E string. Then I'm back to G, the octave. Then I jump to D, which is the 5th. I'm at the 7th fret of the G string here. So I'm playing the root, the flattened 3rd, and the 5th of the G minor 7 chord. So I'm playing the basic G minor arpeggio, which is why it sounds so good. And then I end up on C, which is the root note of the C7. Now, the part of the line that I want to focus on and move around is this, D to C. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this line and I'm going to move it elsewhere on the neck, but maintain the pitch in the register. And that means it's going to sound the same in every position that we play it. So this is the first place we're going to play it. The second place we're going to play it is up here. So we're at the 12th fret of the D string for D and the 10th fret of the D string for C. Now, because we're on a different string, the string thickness comes into play, but also the length of the string. So here, the length of note is quite long, but here it's shorter and we're on a fatter string. So that's going to affect the sound of the note too. Lastly, there's one more place we can play this at the same pitch, and that's here. So we've got D at the 17th fret of the A string and C at the 15th fret of the A string. So we've got or, So what I'm going to do now is play through the chord progression a few times so that you can hear what it sounds like in each part of the neck, and also so that you get a chance to listen to the lines that I'm going to be playing. So you can see just how many options present themselves, and it's all from taking a line, or in this case just 2 notes, D and C, and playing them in different places across the neck. Now I'm going to take a really quick look at the lines that I played, because what I played isn't really important. It's much more about the process of taking lines and moving them around the instrument. Everything that I have played is fully notated and in the workbook for the lesson, so I'll post a link to that below. Now I started with the first position, and I instinctively, and I say instinctively because everything that I've played has come out naturally and instinctively. There's nothing pre-planned or worked out here. So I played, and I moved my hand to this position and I played a rolling line. And then I moved to the second position. And this time I went for something which was much more rhythmic. And then the third position. Now space is tight up here, so I played something right under my fingers. And I went for the wobble or the sting. And I finished off the first time through the progression by going back to the first position. But this time I moved my hand and I played. Now I started the second time through the progression in the first position, but this time I played something altogether more funky. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed that I actually introduced a fourth variation, and it was this. So instead of playing D and C here, or D and C here, I actually played D at the 7th fret of the G string and C at the 10th fret of the D string. So you could say that I borrowed one note from each position, and because of where I am, I played a line right under my hands, which was in complete contrast to all the other lines that I'd played previously. And then it was on to the third position. So instead of playing the wobble or the sting, again I played a line under my fingers, but this time it was a line in fourths. And I finished off at the first position with this. What I'm going to do now is use a technique called octave displacement, and all that means is I'm going to play the same two notes but in different octaves and registers. So we've got, and I'm going to take the two notes D and C and simply play them an octave lower, which gives us, so we've got D at the 5th fret of the A string and C at the 3rd fret of the A string. Now we can play this line somewhere else at the same pitch, and that's here. So we've got D at the 10th fret of the E string and C at the 8th fret of the E string. And there's another variation too, which is this. So we've got D at the 5th fret of the A string and C at the 8th fret of the E string. Now I know each of these positions is going to yield a completely different line, but there's one more variation, and it's this, which is sonically very different. So we've got D at the 19th fret of the G string and C at the 17th fret. Now this line is one octave higher than the original line, but 2 octaves higher than this new line. I'm going to have another play through the chord progression now, and hopefully you'll see and hear that using octave displacement will produce another bunch of great lines. The lines that I played there were really different from those that I played in the previous example, so using octave displacement really has produced a set of interesting bass lines, both rhythmically and harmonically. Now, because the lines that I'm playing are all in the workbook for the lesson, I'm going to run through this really quickly, but this is roughly what I played. Second time. Now I'm on a C and I went for the third line was a little bit different. And then the fourth time now the second time through the chord progression I pretty much repeated the same lines. But the last time, out of nowhere, I played this, which I really like, and as soon as I heard it, I thought it would make something that's really good to work on. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes and apply some octave displacement to it, because I think it'll make an interesting line for you to work on. So we've got C sharp, D, G, and then we jump down to E, F, and G. So it's a line of two parts, and I'm going to apply some octave displacement to each part. The first part I'm going to take is this, C sharp, D, and G, and I'm simply going to play it down an octave, so we get... Now we can play that line here because it's the same pitch, but for now I'm going to stick with this. And now I'm going to take the same line and take it down another octave to here. So we've got, and this, and this. Now, so far we've only looked at C sharp, D, and G. Now I'm going to turn my attention to E, F, and G, and I'm going to play them an octave higher. So I'm going to play E, F, G, and then finish on C. So we get, which is different again. Third variation, E, F, and G up an octave. And there's another variation, and that's this. Now, if you look at my hand position, I'm not going to move my hand this time. And I'm going to play E at the 7th fret of the A string, F at the 8th fret of the A string, G at the 5th fret of the D string, and then we play C at the 3rd fret of the A string. So we've got... So it's a much more fluid, smoother legato line. Now, in every previous example, the E, F, and G has been staccato, and I've punched it out. Even when I took it up the octave. But this time, we've got a much smoother line, and I like it. Now, for the final example, I'm going to play that same line, but I'm going to take the E, F, and G up an octave. So instead of playing, I'm going to play it here. So we get... So we've got lots and lots of variation, and we could go on all day long. But I hope you can see and appreciate what a flexible process this is, and much more importantly, how many great options of bass lines it produces. So I've looked at two different ways to help you create interesting bass lines. The first is taking parts of a line and playing them in the same register at the same pitch but in different places across the neck. And the second is taking parts of a line but playing them in different octaves, so using octave displacement. Both methods will often put your hands in different and unfamiliar places, but that will mean that you'll instinctively play different lines. Now, it goes without saying that you really should know where you are on the neck and what notes to play, but that's a different lesson altogether, and it's something that we're constantly working towards anyway. So take your lines and work on them, change them. Often taking even one note and changing it can give rise to the most surprising and unexpected results. And it's often the unexpected things that we play that are the very best things that we play. Now there's a workbook for the lesson that I'll post a link to below. It's got everything that I've played in it and everything that I've spoken about, but there's also a bunch of extra stuff that's not in this video lesson, and it's additional ideas to help you work on this even further. I'm currently releasing a new video every single week, so please feel free to like things, subscribe to the channel, or hit the bell notification. That way you won't miss out on anything. Thanks for joining me. Look forward to seeing you again, and in the meantime, happy practicing.